More Battles of the American Revolution, this time Volume 7, Germantown, Washington Strikes Back, you have to say, because it has an exclamation point. This came out in 2010, and as you can see, I'm back with some more American Revolution goodness. I just can't quit you, Battles of the American Revolution system. You're so good, you're so fun. I had a really good time playing Utah Springs and Guilford, and decided to pull another one off the shelf because they're so fast to play and they're so enjoyable. This one obviously came out a while ago. This is Germantown, and as you can see, a much larger engagement than the previous two games I've done. Now, if you haven't watched those videos, if you're looking for more of a system overview about how this plays and in general, and sort of my thoughts on the system as a whole, definitely go watch the Utah Springs video, and I'll leave a link for that if you want to click through to that. I'm just going to dive right into the gameplay on this one, because if you've watched the other videos, you kind of know where we are here. So, like I said, much bigger engagement here. You've got a lot more units on the board, and specifically, you've got a lot more bigger units on the board. I'll zoom in here so you can see the Americans. You know, in Utah Springs and Guilford, you know, we had 1s and 2s, maybe sometimes a 3 or a 4, but here we've got multiple 6-4 units. That's an entire stacking limit unit in this hex, and there's several of those. There's another 6-4 over here. Lots of artillery under a lot of these stacks. The Americans dragging lots of artillery, and the British also with lots of artillery in defensive positions. You can see they have this line, Howe's sort of line encampment here in Germantown, just spread out very vertically. Some German Hessians down here guarding the flank. The Schuylkill River. You know, some forward light units, and then obviously the town of Germantown here with the main road that goes through. We've got some key locations such as Musgrave here guarding with his 40th guarding Chew House, which in this particular battle, it was a big stone building that the British essentially put a small detachment in and held out against the American advance, which came under siege through the course of the battle. You can see in this game, it's worth a VP for the British if they control it at the end. That can flip to American control. So the scope of this one is a lot larger. Probably takes a little longer to play, but that's okay. I'm excited for it. So let's talk about how you win this game as either side. So there's a couple different ways. First of all, there's a victory point, sort of decisive victory condition. So for the British, if they can eliminate or capture 17 strength points of American units, they can win basically a decisive victory. If they kill George Washington, who is here, let's zoom in on him. There he is right there, in front of Maxwell, behind Wayne, coming up the road towards Germantown. If Washington is killed, the British only need 12 strength points eliminated or captured. The Americans can win decisively in one of two ways. So first of all, if they don't panic, which is a mechanic in this game where the units can panic, they don't panic and they are able to occupy the British reinforcement hex B here without any British units adjacent at the end of the game, they will win a decisive victory. Otherwise, they need to control both the Market Square and Chew House with no British units adjacent at the end of the game. If they can pull that off, they can win, even if they panic. And then otherwise, the other way to win a victory is lower your enemy's morale, and you can win a marginal victory if you have 2 more victory points at the end of the game than your opponent, each side scoring victory points for eliminating units and leaders, obviously. There's some other special victory points. I can get into those if they happen. There's a fair number of special rules to this game. They're all very simple, but they're all pretty cool. So first of all, this battle, the Americans approached early in the morning at like 5 a.m. and there was a really dense fog sort of hanging over the area, and that's going to have some effects on the line of sight for artillery. While it is dense fog, artillery can only fire into adjacent hexes, which is going to make the advance for the Americans pretty powerful. And then sort of every turn, we're going to be rolling on the fog table over here to see if the fog clears or we go to moderate fog, depending on what turn we're on. And as it slowly becomes more clear, we'll have more range. There's also some really interesting rules around one of the reinforcement leaders that comes on for the Americans. Historically, he was drunk. And so I will explain those when we get to the American reinforcements on turn 2. But you can see that the Americans are going to get a huge stack of reinforcements coming in along that Limekiln road in the north. So the British obviously are going to be faced with a frontal assault from Washington's main force, but also a flanking from Nathaniel Greene. And they're going to have to figure out how to sort of hold both of those off, because they're not really equipped to start the game to fend off an advance from the north. On top of that, the British are not allowed to move the main bulk of their army in the camp until turn 3. So the only units able to move turn 1 and 2 are going to be these sort of forward units here. And that's going to be important because this grouping here, these Americans here, their movement factors in yellow, and that means that on turn 1, they are actually going to get a +1 DRM in combat for their attack on the first turn. So they're going to want to scoot down here, attack this British position, these light infantry as historically happened, and then get into Beggarstown as quickly as possible to set up a position for the rest of the American army to follow up behind. There's also a friendly fire. A certain leader, it's possible the Americans fire on each other, which again historically happened in the fog. There's also this artillery bombardment zone down here. You can see this red outline. So abstracted here because they're not on the map, but there were American artillery on this side of the river. So starting in clear turn, so later in the game, we'll get to be able to bombard any units in this zone with artillery fire from the Americans. So the Hessians are probably not going to want to be set up in there sort of in the middle to later stages of the game. They're going to either want to be pushed forward or defending sort of on these ridges behind. So that should be an interesting wrinkle as we go. Yeah, so that's sort of the game and where we start. And you can see that the Americans, they've got sort of two groupings. They've got this main column here who's going to want to come down the road and get into the town. They want to take Chew House. They want to try and take the market square. Historically, what happened is a bunch of these advanced units bypassed Chew House to get to the square, and then the rear units coming up the road behind ended up sieging Chew House that the British ended up holding all day. You've got Armstrong with these militia. They're going to come down through this forest road and probably engage some of these Hessians. These Hessians have a demi-leader here on horseback. And then they've got a bunch of units back here. Kniphausen, von Kniphausen is here. So there'll likely be some skirmishing between these units. And then, obviously, we talked about the American reinforcements coming from the north. Now, it is important that Cornwallis is going to show up on turns 5. He's going to come in here, and that's going to give the British a little bit of oomph to reinforce their lines. So depending on how well the Americans do or don't do, that could be a hammer blow to them or sorely needed for the British. That's basically everything you need to know. Let's get started with this, and we'll sort of talk about it as it happens. I'm really excited to get into the alcohol rules around the drunk commander. We are going to be using the Battle of the American Revolution solitaire tactics tables. This one, I think, was originally printed in like an older C3I issue. It was in the box of Germantown. Not sure. Yeah, C3I 22 is where this came from. It's the same as the one I showed in the last video. I'm not sure if I got Germantown new or I picked it up through a trade or something, but this was in the box, so I'm very happy that I have 2 copies of this. All right, here we go. 1777. Let's roll. All right, well, we're not even half a turn into the game, and it's already an absolute disaster for the Americans. They've had just the worst luck. So the Vanguard obviously approached this position here, as you would think that they would want to, given their +1 attack DRM on the opening turn, with the 2nd Battalion Lightfoot here and the Corps Reserves. Well, that Corps Reserve artillery forced back Conway's brigade by disrupting them. That means that's a big brigade. That's, 6-4. They were scared off by the artillery. They were forced to retreat 3 hexes. This artillery is now stuck in the open in this hex, with the British being allowed to move in the beginning of the next turn. So that's going to get captured, depending on how this attack goes, by this light infantry, who just simply need to move out to capture it. All the men who were manning those guns have left. Moylan's horse, expecting that they were going to be adding to an attack by flanking around to this 6-4 unit, is now committed to an attack against this 4-4 light infantry battalion on his own. And there's no DRMs to that. It's a flat roll on the 1-3 column, so it's probably not going to go well for him, but we'll resolve it right now. He did choose to withdraw, but of the 4 possible results that the 2nd Battalion Light Infantry could have rolled, he rolled the one that didn't allow him to withdraw. So now he's committed to an attack, the British attacking on echelon against him. Some abandoned artillery that they don't need to worry about. And here comes the American attack at 1-3 odds with no DRMs. Oh, excuse me. It's actually a -1 DRM because its odds are less than 1-3. It's 1-4. So here we go. He rolled an 8. That's not the worst thing I've ever seen in the world. He got real lucky there. So it's an 8 minus 1. That's a 7 on the 1 to 3 column. That is going to be a double retreat for both units. Each unit's going to have to retreat 1 hex. So Moylan's horse, very happy to get out of there. He's got to go this way. The 2nd Battalion Light Infantry is going to, he's got a problem. So the Vanguard smartly came around these lanes around the outside of town and got in behind him. And so now he's forced to retreat. He actually may be captured here. Despite the artillery having a great shot at the oncoming American units, this battalion may actually... he may actually be captured. I think he might be able to retreat there. Oh, I'll double check that and come right back. Okay, yeah, so as I suspected, the British have to retreat in an easterly, which is, this direction, that way, or a southerly direction, which is this way. And therefore he cannot, because there are zones of control being projected by Conway's units here, these rifle units as well. So he's actually going to be captured, which is what a turn of events. This Moylan's horse managed to disorder and put to flight this entire battalion. And that's just a great example of the system, how things can look like they're going to be a disaster, and suddenly they're not a disaster. It's great. It's great. There's just so many wild swings of emotion in this system. So they're going to be captured, and as well as these, I believe these artillery are going to be captured too. Actually, we have to check. They may not retreat. They may stay there, which is possible. They have to roll a morale check. They are going to be a +1 on that. They rolled a 0. So yeah, they're actually not able to retreat either. So in the opening round, it looked like a disaster for the Americans, but these British gave up as if they were French. Maybe they were French, dressed in red coats. All right, so both British units captured. That's a big deal for the Americans, huge deal for the Americans, as that just straight out eliminates 2 British units right off the bat and gives a wide open road for Washington and the rest to come down, barreling down to Chew House. So, wow, what an intro. Okay, I know what you're saying. If you watch my Guilford video, you're like, hey, Justin, you made a mistake. Zones of control don't extend into forested hexes. And you're absolutely right. It was a little too good to be true. The only retreat that these units could make would be to this light forest hex here, because these units aren't projecting a zone of control into woods. You cannot do that. So the British escape by the skin of their teeth here into the woods. And that's bad news for the Americans, because they're going to move next and they can just walk up and capture that artillery from the Americans. So that's all corrected now. I didn't play on. I knew there was something wrong there, and I figured it out, and I got it. We're corrected. We're all good. A good result for the American attack, not a great result in the grand scheme of things. So, yeah, that's where we stand, and we're going to head over to the British side of the turn, where who knows what's going to happen. Okay, one more quick update here. Or quick fix. Defender always has to retreat first in the case of a double retreat. Obviously, British go there. That actually means that this horse unit, who also had to retreat, could have retreated here to protect the artillery, which is what he's going to do, because the Americans can retreat this way or this way. All right, top of turn 2 here. Musgrave marched out of Chew House with a unit of his foot regiment, 40th Foot Regiment, surrounded the Americans that had sort of come into the rear of the 2nd Battalion, didn't attack, captured one of the units there. Doyle's rifles are furiously trying to hold off the British now, and they're stuck there, but the Americans are going to get a chance to move this turn. But what I really wanted to show you was the entry of Stephen here, who comes in at the very beginning of turn 2, before the regular movement phase, and he is the drunk American commander that has some special rules. So when he enters the map with his sort of division, his corps, whatever it is that he's commanding, he's drunk and it's foggy, and you know, who hasn't been on a bender the night before a major battle against the Crown? Am I right? So there's a table on the map, Stephen's movement tables. Every turn we're going to have to roll for his units and see which direction they march, because they're getting conflicting orders, or in some cases no orders, and Stevens himself is pissed drunk. So on this turn we are rolling a d10. We have rolled a 7. That means that his formation is moving off to the southwest. So rather than join the battle and attack the flank up here where the British have sort of positioned themselves on this creek, this stack is going to go off into the wilderness over here. Who knows where they're going? So I'm going to do that, and I'll show you what that looks like. So here we are, southwest. Actually, I made a mistake. Southwest is actually this direction. So they're moving south towards the line, but they're not moving towards the British, and they've also just left an artillery unit up here who can't get through the traffic jam on its own, which is dangerous. But you've got, you know, just a strung out line of guys following a drunk dude through the woods, or through the wilderness, I should say. Yeah, everything is stacked appropriately. Stevens himself, very terrible leader. I guess apparently he was later court-martialed for his role in this snafu. So there we go. Stevens, and every turn now, those units, each of those stacks is going to potentially move in a different direction. And if they ever get next to a formation that does not belong to Stevens, they are there's a chance that there's friendly fire against the Americans, which is going to be just fantastic. So more drama to unfold. Quick picture of things at the after the second American turn. It's not been all bad. It's been actually pretty good. Armstrong's militia came in, dislodged from the top of this little ridge these Jaegers, and actually forced back Ewald back across the creek here to the British line. Those Jaegers in trouble. In the center, finally captured that 2nd Battalion that was manning this artillery. The artillery didn't actually retreat, so it's still occupying the heck, so it can be captured next turn unless the British can find a way to get it out of there. Essentially, the Americans there's been a traffic jam. At the beginning of this game is about managing sort of the traffic of the huge American column coming up. Thankfully, there are a lot of these side roads that run perpendicular to Germantown. So a lot of the American commanders, including Anthony Wayne, Washington, this is Maxwell, they've all decided to sort of skirt the edge of this conflict here and actually come around to the side to try and, you know, separate, you know, drive wedges here in between these lines of British, and they successfully did that here with Musgrave, where he wasn't able to reinforce. We got some cavalry units in here. They attacked Musgrave, and it didn't go perfectly. They had to retreat, but certainly keeping the pressure on. Chew House is the objective. That's a fortified position. It's going to be very tough to take. I believe the British are able to move this turn, or at least I believe the Hessians are able to move this turn, so they'll be able to come up across this bridge and start consolidating their forces against Armstrong's militia. And then finally up in the north here, push back this unit that was sort of expecting this Green's flank to come across. They got disrupted and were pushed back. The cavalry managed to get across on the road. That's going to free up Green's force to really move with speed down here, and the British are going to have to respond to that. Now, unfortunately, Stevens is going to move next turn drunk, and if he gets adjacent to any of these units, we check for friendly fire, which won't be so good. But overall, American opening, much better position than they were sort of when we started and sort of saw what was happening. Both sides have captured a unit, and the morale situation is, you know, the British are almost down into this fatigued space already. So Americans doing pretty good so far. Okay, here we go, the moment of truth. This is Stephen. His troops, he's drunkenly led his troops off down through these woods. They've come tramping through the trees here and have made contact with Muhlenberg, who is trying to march and join Green in sort of the flank attack on the British. It's still dense fog here on turn 4. We made a check for that. The fog did not get any better. So now Muhlenberg and McDougall Brigade here have come into contact with... well, here's Matthew, some of this Grayson unit, who's part of Stevens' command, has sort of wandered in amongst the 9th Virginia over here. So they're going to have potentially an encounter under Matthews. And then here's the rest of Stevens' units. Oops. The 3rd Virginia Brigade and Patton, they've come tramping through the trees. They have spotted some units. So we're about to get a potential friendly fire incident. I've got to roll for each unit in each of those stacks. As soon as we get the first friendly fire result, that will trigger a panic in the American lines. So let's see what happens there. First of all, let's start up here with this Grayson unit. We're rolling a D10. If we roll a 0, friendly fire happens, but there are some modifiers. So we are in fog, so that's a -1. We're getting another -1 if the unit is in Stevens formation, which that Grayson unit is. And no one is stacked with Steven. No one who's firing is stacked with Steven, so it's just a -2. So first for Grayson, we rolled an 8. Okay, no friendly fire. He was quick on the trigger. He didn't shoot his friends. Then we checked this 9th Virginia unit. They're only getting a -1. They know better, just for the fog. Ooh, he rolled a 2. All right, that's a 1. So Matthews stack here, they don't engage in friendly fire. Let's check Muhlenberg here. McDougal Brigade, they're going to get a -1. Let's see what happens with them. Oh no. Okay, they rolled a 1. So they got itchy. So they flip over to panic, and now a couple things happen. Okay, so the panic now spreads uncontrolled throughout the American force. So this first unit panics. Every unit adjacent to him gets a panic marker. Let's do that. And then every unit adjacent to those units gets a panic marker. That means that means green panics. I don't believe I think I'm out of panic markers. No, I have some more. Okay. That means green panics. That means Muhlenberg's brigade artillery panics. That means this artillery panics. That means this artillery panics. And that means Stephen himself panics. So all of these units got freaked out by the friendly fire resolution, and they are all now going to retreat 4 hexes towards the northwest map edge. Every single one of those units. So what was going to be just a swift annihilation of the British right over here is now turning into an absolute self-inflicted rout, which is pretty hilarious. So I'm going to go ahead and do all that movement, and we'll see where we end up after that, and I'll be right back. All right, just basically an evaporation of the northern approach for the Continentals. They all fled off across these creeks into the woods. They are now sort of behind friendly lines, which I guess is good, but not really in a position to join. So they're all going to be able to check every turn now to see if they recover from panic. There are some modifiers to that. But in general, the British now have sort of an opportunity up here. Not a ton of force. We've got Maxwell, who's sitting at that crossroads there. It is the Americans' turn. They did win initiative, but the other side effect of this panic, by the way, the friendly fire incident and the panic engagement actually reduced American morale by 2. So from a morale perspective, both armies now are sort of in the fatigued morale zone, and the Americans just dropped below the British. So not great. The Americans have been doing pretty good up to this point. They actually captured one of the units that they forced out of Chew House. The other one's still in there, holding firm. British trying desperately to relieve that, but the Americans are going to get one more attack here before they arrive. We had a firefight over here with some American cavalry and some British who moved up to this bridge along with a bunch of German Hessians. They attacked the Americans on this hill, but the Americans were able to just engage in sort of a firefight back and forth that's been ongoing. And then finally, Kniphausen took this hill from the Americans, disrupted a formation off of there, and is now sort of sitting pretty here with the rest of his really strong troops coming up the road behind him against these American militia. So I'm not sure how long this flank is going to last. Armstrong's going to have to be real smart about how he picks his engagements. So overall, pretty eventful. Not necessarily sure who has the advantage right now. It kind of hangs in the balance. But, one thing to keep in mind is that next turn, Cornwallis is coming in with some reinforcements, and that could prove decisive, depending on how these engagements go this turn. So, fun times. Here we are at the beginning of the 9:20 a.m. turn, and it's all starting to fall apart now for the Americans. They had good positioning, but on their half of the last turn, they rolled pretty horribly. They took 2-step losses in attack, which killed their morale. They weren't able to get back really very many of their panicked units, as you can see, some floating around up here. And in general, the British response has been swift and effective. The British units have really good values, really good morale values, really good attack values. The Hessians not only managed to push the Americans off this hill, but then their cavalry managed to get down around, and they're pushing the militia back pretty hard. They've managed to climb up this ridge here after the Cumberland Regiment got pushed off. Armstrong is kind of paralyzed with what to do now. He's got Hessians on all sides of him, and they just don't have really, because they're militia, they take just a lot of penalties in combat against trained German soldiers, so there's really not a lot of opportunity to attack. The best he can do is kind of retreat and get out of the way. The American cavalry that was kind of screening the river here has been decided to withdraw from a ferocious British counterattack, and that's allowed Agnew and Gray to get down the road behind them and actually start to encircle the Americans at Chew House, who did manage to take Chew House, so that denies the Brits a VP. but not a good position to be in by any means, with British forces coming up basically every road around that part of town. And then over here, Washington and Wayne tried to sort of push up onto Kelly's Hill and, rain some rifle fire down on the British and try and push through their line there to get at Howe, who's kind of got a defensive posture on this road. But again, they rolled horribly. The British counterattack managed to push them back off the hill. They've consolidated their forces, and it's looking like one strong push here could potentially break through there as well. And then finally up here, some inconclusive skirmishing. Maxwell had a unit take a hit and fall back. The British here have a really strong series of options where they can go at Maxwell's forces. They can come down here and hit the back of Washington's sort of rear guard. Really just not a great position to be in. Their attacks that they launched, the Americans, just didn't result in sort of the ground that they needed to take and establish the dominance that they wanted, and now suddenly they're very vulnerable. Green's all the way back here, and as you can see, many units still panicked this turn. And, the captures now have evened up quite a bit. The British captured several units this turn on their turn. That's pushed their morale almost all the way to maximum. They're really feeling the wind beneath their wings. Unfortunately for the Americans, they're only 3 points away from losing the game. And the worst part about all of this is that Cornwallis has brought his men up the road from near Philadelphia. He's got 2 grenadier battalions. He's got some more really good Hessians. He's got some artillery that he's brought in from New Jersey. He's going to be able to come up this road with strategic movement and get pretty far up there during the British movement turn. And all of this is capped off by the fact that the British just won initiative, so they're going to get to go first. And this may be the hammer blow that ends Germantown in really just a couple of hours. So historically, this was one of the battles, this and Saratoga, were the 2 battles that convinced the French to join in. But if I was French and watching this, I would not be very impressed. And that is all she wrote. The Americans routed at the Battle of Germantown by a really powerful British force. Ultimately, what ended up winning the game for the British here is they captured a really large brigade along with their artillery outside of Chew House before they even had to make the attack on Chew House. But opening this here, it was a huge mistake by the Americans to go so heavy in the north and leave sort of these units exposed. There just wasn't a lot of defense down here, and suddenly the British found themselves surrounding Chew House and trying to take it back. Captured a brigade outside. Their artillery, Cornwallis, marched up the road. He was about ready to throw in against Sullivan or possibly even Wayne up this way. Down here, despite Kniphausen taking some artillery fire and driving him back from Armstrong, the Hessians managed to move in. They captured the unit that was defending these disrupted units. They pushed back the militia yet again along this hillside. They were just a machine steamrolling over Armstrong's forces. We didn't even get to the combats up top. The Americans have turned tail and run. It was about halfway through the game. That's about all they lasted. The British units here are very high quality, a huge amount of morale. And I think the one thing here, managing the morale in this particular game and scenario, is really important for the Americans. They don't have the ability to be fighting the British in the fatigue zone while the British are climbing up back into high morale, because those DRMs that gives you is an absolute killer. Once it starts to slip for the Americans here, it slips real fast. And suddenly the Americans, they found themselves just, turn 3, turn 4, just slightly on the back foot in a couple places, and that turned into a huge pile of momentum for the British. Here's what the captured pile looked like. All of these continental captures coming in the last 2 turns for the British. You can see they captured a couple of artillery units. They captured some rifles. They captured some really big brigades. Huge units here just captured. Meanwhile, the Americans didn't really do much. They captured the units that were in Chew House, but other than that, they grabbed an artillery piece, and that's about it. Battle of Germantown, a decisive British victory, more decisive probably than history would recount for the real Battle of Germantown. It didn't help that the panic sent a bulk of the U.S. forces fleeing, although I'm not really sure they would have been able to get down here in time. It's just, the traffic jam on these roads and the stacking limits in this game would not have allowed them probably to get into a position by this point. So there we go, Germantown. I really like this one for a larger engagement. It is very interesting, and it's very fun to have sort of the big firepower for a lot of these units. It's really fun to have leaders that are really good, and to have sort of on both sides, trying to find the best position that they can to exploit the opponent's weaknesses. The British have less forces, but certainly the better forces. Similar dynamic to Guildford, actually. And the Hessians, my goodness, what a hammer they are down south. They've got really high morale, really big units. Nipphausen's very good. But if you want a bigger scenario, Germantown, definitely very fun. I could see myself playing this again and having a blast. It's big enough that things can go different ways. There's kind of different strategies. If the Americans had not bothered to stop up and take Chew House, would they have been able to penetrate further here and give Washington his center a little bit more support against the British? The British played it pretty cleverly. How it's funny in this game. It's like when you want to get in range and get next to units so that your rifle units can fire. But when you do that, you're committed to an attack. Your rifle units are committed to an attack, but you're committed to an attack with other units who may be in there to support them. But if you just move in with a rifle unit, like if I had moved this rifle unit in here against Howe, right? He fires, he doesn't attack. Well, it turns around on the next British turn. Howe comes back with just 5-1 here on that attack, and so you'd have to move more units in with him, and then you're committed to an attack. What I like kind of about this system is that when you are when you want to attack, you better go all in, because if you don't, you're going to pay for it on the counterattack. There is no half-assing your strategy here. If you decide that you're going to push in a particular area, then you better push hard, because if you don't make those rolls, if you don't get the successes and take the ground you need, it is going to stall out your offensive pretty quickly, which is pretty cool. What else can I say? Obviously, the production is really nice. The map is great. The counters are great. This is the old style white core counter, so they're a bit thinner than the ones in the tri-pack, but still a great game. The one complaint I will say about this is that the living rules, there's a bunch of errata or clarifications needed, and the living rules, which are posted on GMT's site, have a lot of that stuff in them. But this would be a prime game for a new tri-pack. If there was another Battles of the American Revolution tri-pack, this would be a great one to sort of tidy up some of those mistakes, smooth out some of those edges that needed some extra explanation in the living rules, because there is some clarity issues with some of the special rules in this that the designer needed to go in and add some language to. Thankfully, it's pretty easy to figure out, but yeah, great game. Again, this system, can't talk about highly enough. Really great. And if you saw today, on this very day, GMT finally announced that Volume 10 of this series, which is going to be the Battle of White Plains, which was, I think, one of the largest, if not the largest, concentration of forces arrayed against each other during the Revolutionary War. I think it was something like 11,000, over 11,000 for the Americans and 13 to 14,000 for the British in New York. So that's going to be a cool one to play. There's some really cool stuff. It's a 2-mapper, which means it's kind of a monster. And then the campaign scenario is up to 42 turns, which is crazy. That's a crazy long game for this system. But I guess with 2 maps and that many units, there's going to be opportunities to kind of pursue different sort of strategies all along the different wings of the army. I know historically they were saying that particular battle didn't end up really evolving into a battle. It was kind of a light skirmish, and then kind of the armies broke up and went separate ways. But there is going to be a scenario in that game that will play out with, hey, what if Howe had decided I'm going to go all in against Washington? So that should be pretty cool. I'm actually going to do a video here pretty soon about the games that I have pre-ordered for this year, and that will be one of them, just to talk about what's coming up and what I'm excited about. So yeah, very much looking forward to Battle of White Plains. That was a really nice surprise today to see that they're doing a big, larger scale even than this game, Battles of the American Revolution game. So that one's also going to use cards, so it may not be the best for soloing, but I'm very excited for it. Anyways, thanks for joining me. Let me know what you think of this sort of trio of videos that I've done on Battles of the American Revolution, if you've enjoyed them. I think the story that's come out of these has been awesome. The experience of playing it has been awesome. I just want to tear through the other ones as well, but I understand if there's a saturation point, so I may come back to this at some other time, and obviously there's some other games that I want to play in the meantime, but let me know what you think, whether you've liked this, whether it's gotten you into the system, whether you have tried or wanted to try these, or it's inspired you to take it off the shelf if you own one of these and haven't played it yet. I'd be curious to hear what your experiences have been like playing this system. So that'll do it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Hey, just a quick little addendum to this video. I don't usually do this, but I was just actually, as I finished filming, I went upstairs to look at some of the details around Battle of White Plains, and I found myself in the Consim World forum for the Battles of the American Revolution, and it looks like there's some preliminary interest for GMT to do a second tri-pack, which would be awesome. They're taking suggestions and voting on the Facebook page for the series about which 3 games that they should include in that one, and it sounds like at least Monmouth and Germantown are strong contenders and almost guaranteed if they do another tri-pack to be put in there. And so they're trying to figure out how to do the third one. They talked about, I think the developer said that they might do Newtown, which actually comes with 2 games, Newtown and Oriskany. So that'd be another tri-pack with 4 games similar to the first one, which is awesome. So if you're at all interested in this particular series, definitely check out the Battles of the American Revolution Facebook page and make your voice heard there. There's also some chatter in the Consim World forums for the series as well. So that would be very cool. I, for one, would welcome another tri-pack. Despite already owning all of the released games so far in the system. So yeah, I just want to throw that in there at the end. Pretty cool, and I hope we get more.